4 years in the White House after 30 years of slavery. Those were the words of Elizabeth Keckley, a woman whose life crossed two completely different Americas. One America chained her body, stole her labor, and denied her freedom. The other invited her into the White House, where presidents were advised, wars were discussed, and history was being written. But to understand those 4 years in the White House, you must first understand the 30 years of slavery that came before them.
Elizabeth Keckley was born enslaved in Virginia in 1818. She entered a world where her future had already been decided before she could even speak. She belonged, by law, to another family. Her childhood was not marked by play or safety, but by labor, fear, and obedience. As a little girl, she was made to work. She cleaned, cooked, carried water, and obeyed every command given to her. Mistakes were punished harshly. Kindness was rare. Childhood, for Elizabeth, barely existed. She later wrote about the pain of seeing her mother beaten and the helplessness of knowing there was nothing she could do. But even in those conditions, something remarkable began to form inside her. Discipline, intelligence, and skill. Elizabeth learned sewing. At first, it was practical work, repairing clothes, stitching simple garments. But soon it became clear that her hands possessed uncommon talent. She could shape fabric beautifully, fit dresses perfectly, and create elegant clothing that wealthy women admired. That talent would become the tool that changed her destiny. As she grew older, Elizabeth was moved between households and forced to work wherever her enslavers wished. She experienced humiliation, violence, and deep emotional suffering. Before we continue with the story of Elizabeth Keckley and the secrets that consumed an entire community, make sure you're subscribed to Echoes of the Past and hit that notification bell. We uncover the darkest corners of American history that textbooks won't touch. And leave a comment telling us what state or city you're listening from. We love knowing where our audience discovers these forgotten horrors. Became a mother, giving birth to a son named George. But even motherhood was touched by slavery. Her son was born into bondage just as she had been. Elizabeth knew that unless something changed, he would grow up under the same chains. That thought became her driving force. She stitched late into the night. She accepted extra work. She saved every coin she could. For years, she worked with one dream: to buy freedom for herself and for George. It was a nearly impossible goal. Freedom was expensive, and enslaved people were rarely allowed to control their own earnings. Yet Elizabeth refused to surrender. Finally, in 1855, after decades of labor and help from sympathetic clients who respected her skill, she raised enough money, about $1,200, to purchase freedom for herself and her son. After more than 30 years of slavery, she was free. Freedom, however, did not arrive with comfort. Elizabeth had no inheritance, no land, no safety net. She had to build a new life from nothing. So she moved to Washington, D.C. There, in the growing capital of the United States, she began again with only one true asset: her talent. And it was enough. Her reputation as a dressmaker spread quickly among senators' wives, military families, and elite women of the city. Her gowns were elegant, precise, and fashionable. She became one of the most sought-after seamstresses in Washington society. Then came the client who would change her life forever: Mary Todd Lincoln. When Abraham Lincoln entered the presidency in 1861, the nation was falling apart. Southern states were seceding. Civil war was beginning. Washington was tense, divided, and uncertain. Mary Todd Lincoln wanted to present strength, dignity, and refinement as First Lady. She needed someone she could trust to manage her wardrobe.
She chose Elizabeth Keckley. Soon, Elizabeth was no longer just sewing dresses. She was entering the White House regularly. She walked the halls where generals arrived with reports, where political allies whispered strategies, where the future of the Union was debated. A woman once legally treated as property. But her greatest role was not fashion. It was trust. Mary Lincoln leaned heavily on Elizabeth emotionally. The First Lady faced constant criticism, political attacks, loneliness, and grief. During the war, her son Willie became ill and died inside the White House in 1862. The loss shattered her. Elizabeth stayed close, offering comfort and stability during one of the darkest moments of Mary Lincoln's life. Then came an even darker day. In April 1865, President Lincoln was assassinated.
Shock swept the nation. Inside the White House, grief became chaos. Mary Lincoln collapsed under the weight of tragedy. And once again, Elizabeth Keckley was there. She witnessed history not from newspaper headlines, but from the private rooms where mourning happened in silence. For 4 years, she had stood close to power, but also close to sorrow. Years later, Elizabeth decided to tell her story. In 1868, she published her memoir, Behind the Scenes, or 30 Years a Slave and 4 Years in the White House.
It was one of the first autobiographies by a formerly enslaved black woman to describe both slavery and life at the center of American government. The book was courageous. It revealed the brutal realities of bondage. It also showed the hidden human pain inside the White House. But many powerful people were furious. They believed she had exposed private matters, especially concerning Mary Lincoln. Society turned against her. Clients disappeared. Invitations ended. The same elite world that once praised her quietly pushed her aside. Once again, doors closed. Yet Elizabeth Keckley had already done something greater than gain status. She had left testimony. She had shown that a woman born in chains could purchase freedom, build a business, enter the White House, and write her own history. She proved that intelligence can survive oppression, that dignity can outlast cruelty, and that truth, once written, can outlive those who tried to silence it. So when she said, 4 years in the White House after 30 years of slavery, it was more than a title. It was a victory statement, a record of distance traveled, from the auction block to the halls of power, from silence to authorship, from bondage to history.